I'll start with this. What do you think is the defining characteristic of this season to you? Like, as you're getting ready at the start of the season, what's your major big editor, big writer narrative?
Mm,
How are you selling this if it's like, if they're coming to you, I'm like, hey, we need to write, this is a script, right? The NHL is scripted. The Leafs are a scripted product. How are we selling this as not, hey, the Leafs, the same thing as before with a couple different guys?
Well, it feels like we've said it too many times, but
Yep.
this really feels like kind of like the last stand for the core group, right? Like, I mean, the Nylander situation is who knows where that goes. I mean, maybe the way you sell it is like it's like the beginning of the post Dubas era, and it's really Shanahan's really in charge. You know, he's got a new GM there. They ran back most of everything else. They made some iffy bets, and I think everything that's happened just puts even more pressure on the core guys, especially when we get down to the playoffs. Just with, the supporting cast to me looks a little bit weaker. We'll see what they add over the course of the season and before the trade deadline. But and the other thing that adds pressure to the Leafs is the Atlantic is not this behemoth division this year. Boston, Tampa, Florida should all be weaker. So I think that needs to be part of the conversation too, that the Leafs are a little bit weaker roster-wise than last year, but their competition got even weaker than they did, and it's right there for them to win the division. And so maybe, like, for all this talk about how good of a regular season team they've been, never won a President's Trophy, never won the division. Well, they won the Canadian division, but they've never won the actual Atlantic division. That's one statement they could make. And I know the regular season doesn't mean that much, but you win the division, you get a wild card matchup in the first round. The table is set pretty well for you to do a little bit more than win one round this year.
Yeah, I think it's important to them. I will say it's a tough timing from a narrative standpoint the year after Boston blows it in round one, right? Like the team where we went, hey, hockey's pretty even in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but if you're going to say that there's been a year where there's a juggernaut that's going all the way, it's Boston. It's like, oops, you're out. It's over. You lost the Panthers.
Look how good Florida was, right? Like, that's the tough thing in the NHL is you have a bunch of injuries or your goaltending isn't great. Then you can get like a really good 7 or 8 seed, and it's not going to matter how good your regular season was.
Okay, so this is mine, and I'm glad you went with the all-in season, or this is finally it. It's like I'm actually going the opposite. I'm saying this year, 2023, 2024, the Toronto Maple Leafs, quote, the death of the all-in year. Because, like, what? Why are we supposed to believe that this year would be any different in terms of the stakes of this? Like, I think I'm trying to look at this with a bit of a fresh perspective, which is, okay, maybe us selling it as, well, now it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf of sports. We're like, this year they have to do something or else you're going to see major changes. And I know Kyle Dubas was fired and they brought in a new general manager, but ultimately this feels very, very similar to a lot of different seasons, right? Hey, they brought in some new names that are going to feel exciting. Hey, there's some gambles. Maybe they're a little too thin in net. It's just, you can recycle a lot of the different takes. Hey, do they have to get to a conference finals or someone's going to leave? I really don't see it that way. The way that I'm looking at this is, as long as Brendan Shanahan's here, which barring a cataclysmic disaster this season, I think he will be moving forward. Like, I don't think that they're going to make some major front office shakeup unless maybe they lose in the first round again or they don't make the postseason.
Yeah, but that could happen.
Yeah, that could happen, right? It's on the table. But I think that the more likely outcome here is that they capitulate, they give William Nylander a big contract extension, and then we're back into talking about the core four and going into the final year of Tavares and Marner and what their 2 next deals look like. Like, I think that these 5 guys, because I should include Morgan Riley in this, I just think that the continuity is going to continue to exist. And so we're just looking at this and saying, hey, can these guys get it done this year? Can they learn the thing? But I'm over it's all in time. I just don't, I don't see it.
Yeah. Once you get Matthews signed for 4 more years, you're not rebuilding anymore, right? So like all in is like you put your chips on the table, and if it doesn't work, you're pulling it apart. I guess I wouldn't say all in. I would just say kind of like a last stand for the group as it's constituted. And like I said, we've said that so many times before that it's not a really good theme to kind of peg your season preview on for this team.
Yeah, I just, here's my strongest belief now that William Nylander has not been dealt. Is Brad Treliving really going to let him walk Johnny Gaudreau style? I don't think so. I think that eventually he's going to come to them with an offer and they're going to say, damn it, you got us. We're going to give you this money. We're going to pay you because we can't let you walk for nothing because there's just no other way to better ensure those 4 years of Austin Matthews. And, maybe a year from then or whatever, they end up making another trade. Maybe they do make some type of a big swing move to balance out the roster, whatever. But I think the likelihood or the most likely outcome is they're waiting for the $11 million of John Tavares to come off the books and then reevaluate, what his next deal is going to look like and then reshape the roster around those 4 guys making big money, which will essentially be those 3 guys because Riley's deal is going to look probably just fine.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, is that if you're looking kind of medium term, the cap's going to start going up $4.5 million a year.
Yeah.
And then you have $11 million come off for Tavares. I mean, there could, and even if you pay Nylander, how much more is he going to get than the 7 he makes now?
Exactly.
At most 3.
Mm-hmm.
Marner's going to get how much more? I mean, Marner's almost at 11. What's he going to get? An extra $1 million or something? Like, it's not going to eat up.
I know. This is going to be a
deal.
weird negotiation just because they're like, you were so overpaid. We can't offer you a raise. Like, you can have the same money essentially to come back.
Potentially, yeah. But it puts them in an interesting situation because, cap's 83.5 this year. They're saying it's going to be 87.5 the year after, and then you're going to be up over 90 by the time, you're looking at the Tavares deal being up. Even if you bring back Nylander on a big ticket and you get Marner back on, let's say, a little bit more than what he's at, you're probably going to go into free agency 2025 with your pockets full of cash. Now, the question is, anything available in free agency for you to go and sign? All eyes on Edmonton, I guess. I mean, does Draisaitl decide to walk or, that's when it could get really interesting around the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I just think that it's gonna be that way. All right. So what's the biggest roster question to you? Because I think there's a case for
there's
3
2.
things.
Well, I mean, it could be 3. I mean, if you want to put goaltending in there, it could be 3. But for me, the 2 biggest ones, and I think they're tied, is the blue line and center ice.
Yep.
And center ice is like the blue line. I can see a path where, like, if Liljegren really steps up, I can be like, okay, the top 4 is okay, and then they add a defenseman at the deadline, and they're all right. Center is tough. Like, the story of center ice, I think, for them was they tried to bring back Ryan O'Reilly. They really tried. They made a pretty big contract offer to him. They didn't get him back. And then it was kind of scramble mode because there was hardly anything available in free agency. Like, look at the deal that JT Compher got in Detroit, like just huge money for a 3rd-line center. The Leafs didn't want to do that. So they give Kampf more than he's worth to be the 4th-line center. And then it's like 3rd-line center is like, we don't know. We're going to try Nylander there, even though we know Keefe hates Nylander down the middle, and it lasted all of 2 preseason games.
There's no greater waste of breath in media history than Nylander at center takes that we did for 2 weeks. It's just like, it's insane that we did that. And I knew that it wouldn't be this way, but I still had to play the part. And yeah, I'm sick to myself that I should have just stayed firm with this is never going to happen. Why are we talking about this?
Well, the only reason it was going to happen is because they don't have any other options. Like, who's going to play 3rd-line center for this team? If Minten, God bless Minten. He's 19 years old. He's a 2nd-round pick. He didn't blow the doors off the WHL last year.
Someone hates Fraser Minten. Noted. Got it.
He plays for my team. Yeah. He plays in my hometown team.
Exactly. Sometimes we hate
I watched him as much as any of the Leafs prospects. I mean, I have like the WHL subscription, and I watch Kamloops play. So it's from what I've seen, unless something happened over the summer that he kind of completely changed, it's going to be hard for him to last beyond the 9 games is my prediction. I wish him all the best. I hope that I'm wrong. Sometimes with prospects, you get it wrong and they're ahead of schedule, but it's just a lot to hang on him. And if it doesn't work out for Minten, what do they do at center ice the rest of the year?
So this is, I agree. I think there's 3 things and we'll go through them in order because I think on the outset, everyone looked at the blue line and went, oh, the blue line is the biggest question mark, and blue line. And now the more I feel about it, I'm like, they'll be fine in the regular season, right? Like, sheltered minutes when your 3rd pairing is Mark Giordano and Timothy Liljegren, you can do just an insane amount worse than that, right? Like, they have enough depth there that I think they will be fine. Playoffs, I think trade deadline, the acquisition might end up being bigger, but as of right now, the way the roster started, that's the part of the Minten story that I think is being, I don't want to say overlooked because that's a bit light, people are bringing this up. But yeah, if Fraser Minten is your opening day 3rd-line center, I think it tells you that you don't have enough centermen, and that the Nylander thing didn't work, that they don't trust Domi down the middle, that they don't want to play David Kampf too many minutes. And yeah, this is an exciting line. I think that there's something to it. I actually enjoy, I think that they made the right call keeping him here. I think it might be the wrong decision if they let him play 10 games. Like, I think it's a two things can be true situation.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. You burn a year of the contract, though, right? Like,
yeah, if it's right, if he looks the part, and he and Nyes and Yarncroc are this third line that brings a bunch of energy and is producing some, then I think you let it ride. But I'm with you just in terms of, okay, wait, so he's 19. No one expected him to be here at this point. He wasn't the first line center of his junior team. Like, it seems like when he's playing actual NHL competition over a long stretch that the fairy tale of this story might end up taking a bit of a turn.
It's a lot to ask of him, and you're 100% right. Like, the biggest reason they're doing it is they don't have a lot of other options. You know, like, they came into the prospect development camp not thinking that, you know, he was going to make it. So, you know, there is some chemistry there with Nyes. It's a fun story having the two kids play on the same line together. It reminds me of back in 2016 when, you know, they had Nylander and Marner and Matthews all come in, Hyman, and I think they had 7 or 8 rookies on that team. Like, it's a fun idea to have these young guys, and, you know, they're even talking, maybe even Kokkonen could make it on the on defense as well as the extra guy and take some of those games that Giordano sits out. So, and you got Joseph Woll in goal. So there is kind of like, for the first time in a long time, there's this little bit of a prospect movement on the roster, and there can be contributions there. Like, that's fun. Like, that's a good story to watch them, because those kind of kids, and I was looking around the league, like, there's a whole bunch of players that weren't in the league last year, a whole bunch of young players that have made rosters all over the league. And that's kind of, you know, the way the NHL is going. You get these entry-level contracts. Everyone's making $700,000-800,000, and you can fit them on the roster, and you start to see guys on entry-level contracts making teams that are playing as third defensemen or third-line forwards or whatever. And, you know, and it's a huge boost to a team if you can contribute in your top 9 forwards or your top 4D on an entry-level deal. So all those are good things. And the good news with Minten is that his strength really is kind of his defensive play, his positioning, winning faceoffs. Like, he's going to be good. He's not going to burn you in terms of, you know, really dumb turnovers or things like that. The question just is he ready for the pace of play? And he's got some size on his side, but does he have, you know, the strength, and does he know how to use it, and does he get pushed around? Because center ice is a whole different ball game. And if you look at the way the Leafs lineup is constructed, and, like, let's say the Leafs are protecting a lead. Let's say they've got a 1-goal lead in the opener tomorrow against Montreal. You feel good about getting Matthews and Marner out there as a line. What's the next line you throw over the boards?
Well, I think that's where Keefe is going to be creative with his, you know, his juggling, because I feel confident with 3 of the team centers protecting a lead, no sweat. And that's sort of the beauty of this. That's the part that I actually like, is I think that they're going to find a way to really shelter this kid and let him go slowly. Like, I don't think he's going to be taking defensive zone draws with a 1-0 lead, right? Like, I don't see it. Even though he's good in the dot, whatever,
There's a reason they put Yarncroc out there, though. I think actually he is going to get some defensive assignments.
Maybe. I think that's going to fall on
Kampf. Tavares, Nylander to play tough defensive minutes. Like, there's just no way.
No, I think they're going to trust the top line and the bottom line, but then they're going to juggle certain players around. Like, do you think Yarncroc's not going to see minutes with Kampf? I do.
No, that's what they're going to do. They're going to scramble. That Kampf line is going to look completely different when they're protecting a lead in the third period.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what Keefe's going to do, and this is a part of it that he's basically. This is a thing that he's always done. He's never been afraid to juggle the lines, except for that Columbus series when it was the most painful thing ever. Well, actually, sorry, he's never been afraid to juggle the lines except for breaking up the top line, which would solve a lot of his problems, and he just seems terrified to do. Because honestly, like, to me, the answer with the center piece moving forward here, at least for a while, regular season wise, right? I don't think playoff wise. I think they're probably going to have to add some depth at that position. They're probably going to have to make a move on the blue line unless things really break their way. God forbid. The scary one is something bad happens in net, and that becomes an area where they need to pour assets into. But I think you want to give Minten a look and just see, hey, can he be a contributor? Because why not? Because your other options aren't all that great. But ultimately, I would just say, hey, Domi, you're centering a line with Nylander. Like 16, Marner is back with Tavares, and Matthews, you're with Bertuzzi, and you guys got to carry out a line. Like, these guys should be. They have the right idea with the Nylander driving his own line thing to me. They just have it wrong in the sense of him being a center, which he's just clearly not going to be. And in a contract year too, like I don't think it's going to end up happening. So just go pure offense and have Domi be this offensive, because that's what you're kind of trying to do with the Minten thing, right? Like I know he's a two-way player and we're doing all this, but yeah, I don't think he's going to be a shutdown player at 19 years old in the NHL. Maybe that would be awesome if he is, but I think it's harder to believe that is going to be an amazing line for them long term, rather than just having a third line offensive group where they're trying to spread around the scoring and make every one of their stars drive a piece of this team.
I just think it comes back to what you said, is that Keefe's not going to trust Domi down the middle. Like he doesn't trust Nylander there. He's not going to trust Domi there.
He doesn't trust him as much as he trusts a 19-year-old second-round pick.
That's exactly right. Yes. I mean, there wasn't even a thought to put Domi down the middle.
It's true. It is true.
So, I mean, that's telling. But then to have Nylander and Domi on the same line with Tavares and the foot speed issues, it's like, I feel like that is the sheltered line. I feel like that is the one getting the offensive zone starts. And that's going to put even more pressure on Nyes and Minten. I think that's what we're going to see here against Montreal tomorrow.
Maybe again, Montreal. They should be fine against Montreal. I think there's a lot of, the lesser guys than Minten on the Canadians this year. Okay, so here's the parts I like about the Minten decision, though, is like, I don't think there's any harm in letting him start the season here. In fact, I love the idea of you rewarding a kid who's super enthusiastic, who gets I like the idea, even frankly, as an entertainment product, rewarding the fans a little bit here, going, all right, what's the difference? We're going Pontus Holmberg or we're going Fraser Minten? No, I want some, when we're talking about narratives and what's changed and what's different, like having that youth movement or that young, underbelly of young players. I think that's nice. I think that's a nice, refreshing thing for the team. I think that's a refreshing thing for the fan base. It's good all around. Plus, I don't know, like, you're Mr. WHL, you've got your pass, you're watching these games. I think it gets a little overstated sometimes. Like, you can find examples of guys who go down and have success and turn around and they're great. You can find examples of guys who it doesn't work out for. I don't know if a kid who is this mature and who has this kind of a game and who's 19 years old is going to necessarily flourish down in the dub anymore, right? Like, I don't know what the value of this is. Like,
they were going to make him the captain. They're going to put him on the top line. They're going to put him on the top power play unit. Like, he was going to have to carry the mail in a way he didn't last year. That's the only thing that would be different. He would get to play the World Juniors. He's still got some developing to do. But the question is, can he do it in the NHL or not? Because some guys can.
Right. The thing I like about him, though, and Tavares said the same thing, and all of them have said it, and I don't know, it seems true. And maybe I'm just reading too much into the fact that he was this classic piano player, but is that everyone talks about his maturity, that he doesn't feel 19. And I do think that matters, right? Like, there are some guys that are 25 that feel 19. There's some 19-year-olds that feel 25.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, and Nyes is similar, too.
Yeah.
You talk, like, they just...
Oh, yeah.
They're not intimidated by the moment at all. And I don't think Minten's going to be. So it's not a matter of... I don't think it's going to be a matter of nerves or composure or anything like that. Minten's played in some big games. He was in the Memorial Cup, but it's just a matter of, can he hack it day to day to day, especially if they're not going to shelter that line. Yeah.
Here's the other part I like about it. Matthew Nyes got completely sheltered from narratives. This would have been a big Matthew Nyes narrative talk. And his career so far has been hype. Comes into the playoffs, he performs extremely well. Hype. If we were doing the thing of when projecting forward earlier, before the Minten stuff was happening, is like, he's the X factor to the season. What is he going to become? And I like that in this media market where it can get just sun level intensity on certain players, like we're seeing a little bit with Minten, but at least he's 19, so we go whatever. There's a little bit of heat, I think, off of Matthew Nyes. I like that.
And he looks great, and he looks like a guy who could push to go up the lineup. Like, if Domi's making defensive mistakes, I could see Nyes playing higher. If the chemistry's not there with Bertuzzi and Matthews and Marner, Nyes could potentially be the one that pushes up. So the Leafs have had a lot of luck with these second round picks, haven't they? Like, it's pretty unusual that you see a second round pick turn and get into the NHL and make an impact as quick as some of the players they've picked lately.
Yeah, minus the guy whose path now becomes very muddied in Nick Robertson.
Yeah, but I think the thing to do with Robertson is just send him to the Marlies. Well, I send him to the Marlies, give him 2 months there,
Sure.
put him on the top line, play him 20 minutes a night, put him on the top power play unit, play him with good players. I mean, they're going to have a whole bunch of veterans down there, build a really good line around him. And if he still can't get it done, then it might not happen for him. But, he's had so many injuries that I'm not ready to 100% write him off yet.
I'm not going to write him off. I will just say that my understanding of Robertson in terms of one of the things outside of injuries that has held him back is that down at the AHL level, he is a little bit too much me. And that there's a little bit of, hey, be a little bit more not that. And by just empowering him fully on the Marlies to just say, hey, you're the guy that's doing all these things and play. I don't know what else he has to prove at the AHL level. I think he's an AHL stud. He's fine there. He can do those things. To me, he's just your classic needs a change of scenery player. And the problem is I can't imagine that another team would offer Toronto a lot for him. The hope is that, to me anyway, if I'm Toronto, if I'm looking at this the hope is that if you have to call him up, which you probably will a couple of times this year, that he does look better. He had another fine preseason, but there was really no buzz around him because there were other guys ahead, right? Minten and Nyes, and Kokkonen, they ended up taking the young guy buzz away from Robertson this year. But you're hoping that he fills in sort of admirably, can put up some better statistics that he has at the NHL level in his career so far, stays healthy, and then actually becomes a chip for you in a trade this year. I just don't think he's ever going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf top 6. That's just my feeling on it.
Well, I mean, one way to think of it is, the fourth line they've got right now with Gregor, Kampf, and Reeves, if someone gets hurt in the top 9 and you need some offense to replace some offense, you look at what's on the Marlies, you look at what's on the fourth line. Robertson might be the answer, right? Like if you go down a winger, who are you recalling that's going to be able to pop in a few goals from the Marlies right now?
No, there's not really anybody. The only thing is it's 25 NHL, no, more. 31 NHL games, 3 goals.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, he hasn't done enough.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, he's done enough in the AHL. His numbers in the AHL are good enough.
No, that's what I'm saying. He's proven himself in the AHL.
Well, what's the baseball term? Is it like quadruple A?
Yeah,
I mean, that might be what he is.
Totally.
Like he just might be a guy that's between where he's really good in the AHL. And there's been lots of guys like that. I mean, the Leafs just hired one, Chris Bork. They just hired one like that. I mean, he was a really, really good small forward in the AHL and just was never able to produce in the NHL. And that happens a lot, especially with guys who aren't amazing skaters.
Yeah, it's funny though, because I really do believe that he's one of those guys that gets dealt to the San Jose Sharks, he goes back to California in some trade, and people look at his numbers year over year and go, can you believe the Leafs just gave up on this guy and didn't get too much in return? I think he's destined to be that dude. He'll put up some fine numbers on a team where he gets that opportunity over and over and over again, and there isn't that pressure to be great. And on Toronto, I just think that he's going to leave you wanting in the top 6 because they're trying to win a Stanley Cup. And even in a pinch, I just don't know. I don't know if I've seen it in the top 6. Anyway, that's enough bubble guy talk. All right, we're back to the real roster, the real meat. So yeah, we agree. The Minten thing is fun. The Minten thing has the most upside. I like the move, but yeah, it does tell you something about the center depth. Okay, so the blue line, because we'll go down the 3 big roster questions, because I think that the top 6 talent is pretty clear, although I do have a Bertuzzi thought for you. I think this is the way I'm framing the blue line. I think it's going to be good in the regular season, fine in the regular season, maybe some frustrating Klingberg conversations people have, maybe some what's up with Brody, but ultimately it's going to be a good regular season blue line, and then impossible to believe that it will be the postseason blue line.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And you mentioned it earlier. You hit on it. Like, they have a good third pair. Like, if you look statistically, Giordano Liljegren is better than most other NHL teams' third pairs. Like, it would be top 5 around the league. Yeah. But then if you match up the Leafs' top pair and their second pair against other pairings around the league, it's not elite, and I think there's been some debate in the preseason. We've had some rankings. I think Harmon Dale, one of our young writers, had a piece ranking the blue lines around the league, and I think he had the Leafs 14th.
That feels right.
I don't think that that's far off.
No.
Yeah, I mean, so if you rank their forwards, the Leafs would be higher than that. Goaltending, I mean, a little bit of a crapshoot, but potentially a little bit higher maybe than 14th. But the blue line is really, and it's specifically the top 4 in the blue line, it's definitely not elite. And if Klingberg struggles as much as he has the last 2 years, the blue line could be a real problem. And I think there's real opportunity there for Liljegren to push his way up. I mean, it's never been easier for him to bust into the top 4, and that's probably best case scenario for the Leafs.
Yeah, see, this is why I can't be overly concerned in the regular season, is I think the worst case scenario is Klingberg really struggles and doesn't look good. But Timothy Liljegren in his age, 24, 25 season, starts to come starts to come into his prime a little bit, has enough games under his belt. He really flashed in the regular season last year. He looked good in the preseason to me in the parts that I saw because, it's painful for me to try to watch these entire games, but I do try to focus on some things. And I thought that he looked good. He's strong. I think that there's a real potential, at least for him, to step in and be, the team's fourth defenseman and, answer one of their questions there. I hate it when teams do, you know what, before I go to the goaltenders and before I go to this is I do have one more forward thought. I know this is kind of a stupid take and people will freak out about this to some degree because they'll be like, what does this matter? It's depth. I hated the Sam Lafferty trade. And I don't hate it because they got a 5th round pick for him. I hate that was the guy they decided to remove for a couple of the reasons. One is that you don't have center depth. 2 is, where would you say he ranked in terms of their best players against the Panthers last year? He was one of their best 10 guys, right?
Yeah, but he wasn't great against Tampa. There were games he was a healthy scratch down the stretch.
10.
They think Gregor's as good as Lafferty and makes fine. 50% less.
Yep.
So
that's fine.
It really came down to that $350,000 like that. It came, or Ryan Reeves. Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Reeves better be good in the room because I think that it might have cost you a better player. I just if you're going to ask me, hey, who do you think is going to have more impact in the playoffs, Ryan Reeves or Sam Lafferty? I would have been like, well, it's Lafferty. And I don't know, man. I just think that this is a guy with good speed, good size. He could play up the lineup. And when I was talking about the whole, hey, maybe you shift Nylander down a line and you let everybody drive their own lines, at least Lafferty was someone they were trying next to Tavares. And maybe they didn't like it, and that was part of the reason that they ended up making the move is they went, you know what, this isn't going to be sustainable here, whatever. I just liked him as a guy that could play up and down the roster and fill a couple of different spots for them. And, do we think that Gregor is going to end up getting some second line minutes with with Tavares? I don't know if I see that the same way as Lafferty, who at least was there.
Yeah, I mean, the cap got really crunched for them. I was looking at it last week, and it really feels like Lafferty's on the bubble just because of the number. I mean, and he's only making 1.15, so it sounds a bit bizarre, but there just weren't a lot of other places that they could shift money out.
I get it. I just didn't like it.
Especially, you keep Minten, especially you want to have an extra forward, right? Or an extra defenseman. So if they kept Lafferty, they were going to be rated the league minimum roster, which means Giordano has to play every single night. And it also means that Minten has to play every night, and you can't give him a break even on a back-to-back or on a road trip or anything like that if he struggles. And I think that's just too much pressure. Whereas now they're going to be able to mix in some extra guys. They're going to be able to change the roster in the early going of the season. They're going to have to move some things around when Connor Timmins gets back or put Timmins on waivers. They're still tight against the cap, but it just gives them some breathing room. And if Lafferty was making $800,000-900K, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. No, I know. It's just that's one of the ones where I'm like, I hate it for the roster, understand it for the cap, but just.
Well, it's not just Reeves. The Klingberg number is problematic too because Klingberg's not worth 4.15. He's just not. Especially if he ends up on the third pair. And we'll see what he brings to the power play. I mean, the only way that I think Klingberg helps the Leafs if he's really good on power play 1 and it frees up Riley to play a lot more minutes at even strength. That could be what he brings to the table.
Yeah, that's kind of the best case scenario. Okay, so the goalies. I hate when people are like, well, if this guy gets hurt, then this guy's on your team now, right? Because Martin Jones ends up getting waived. And I go, yeah. Any team whose top guys get hurt is not going to leave phenomenal goaltending, left over. That said, does the Leafs goaltending feel a little under-discussed to you in terms of, hey, Joe Woll has X amount of starts and Samsonov last year was viewed as a lottery ticket? Yeah, it does feel like maybe we're taking a little too for granted.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, the tough thing with goaltending is you just don't know. It's so hard to predict. If I give you a take on the goaltending, what's going to happen here, it would just be a hot take. It would just be guessing. No one knows what's going to happen here, right? We've seen goalies like Joseph Woll come in and play really well, and he could come in and grab 35 starts. He could challenge Samsonov. Or he could be terrible, the situation that they were in with the way that waivers works and everything, they had to give Woll a shot because, if they do, like you said, and they moved off of him, either lose him on waivers or trade him for
No, they could never do that.
Well, I mean, it happens around the league. I mean, look, Ottawa traded the Gustafson, the goalie in Minnesota, and look how good he ended up being. So it's tough because waivers forces you to decide on goalies a lot sooner than you're often ready, especially goalies like Woll, who played in college and then had a bunch of injuries. Like he hasn't played a lot of games, so it's hard to know what he is. But the funny thing is, he's not that young. I mean, he's the same age as Austin Matthews. Like that, he's a mature guy, and I think you just got to see what you have there, and you give him a half season as the backup, and if it doesn't work, then like you said, they could be looking for a goalie at some point.
Yeah, I think that's a tough scenario for them. There's a couple things. One is that, I'm not. Last year, Samsonov was lights out in the preseason, and this year he was a little shaky. And I went, this was a big part of the last year stuff. Was, hey, he looked really good, and it made you feel a little bit more comfortable. And it's preseason, whatever. It could end up changing. Like some goalies have started the regular season here poorly and then ended up being great, right? Like Belfour. But I'm not as sure. You're right. The goaltending thing is lottery ticket stuff in general. But I don't know if I feel amazing about Samsonov a year later because of exactly that. Like he's not Hellebuck. He's not something solid in net. And could I see a scenario where he ends up having a down season and then all of a sudden they're having to lean on the kid with 11,
100%.
12 NHL starts? That's the only thing that's sort of keeping me up about the goaltending is that I think it's a little bit more of a variant for this team or a variable for this team than we might be discussing it.
Well, let's bring this all together, everything that we've talked about on this show. The other thing that concerns me with the goaltending is I think they're going to be under more pressure than last year. The forwards aren't as good defensively. The blue line isn't as good defensively. Keefe's system is going to help a lot, but I could see this Leafs team potentially scoring more goals than they have the past couple of years, allowing more goals in the past couple of years, generating more chances, allowing more chances. Like it could be a bit more of a freewheeling, offense-driven lineup because that's the kind of player that Domi and Bertuzzi and Klingberg are. The way that they've changed the DNA to the extent that they have has gone more in that direction and away from kind of like the really strong two-way player direction that they were pursuing with O'Reilly and Achari and Lafferty and some of these other players. So there's going to be a different look to this team, and it could be a different look that puts more pressure on the goalies. There could be more nights where they're giving up 4 or 5 goals in a game.
I think that's a really good point. That's a good place to end it. This was good. This was good today. Are you excited for a full season of this? Talking to me? Yeah.
Didn't we do a full season last year?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, this is good.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
it's good. Once a week we hit the high notes, and
sometimes
I don't know how you do the hours and hours every single day. That's not my role, though. I could parachute in and give you what I got, and then
that's what you learn. That's like I'm a machine. I'm a machine. I just make it work over and over again. James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor at The Athletic. Thanks as always, and we'll talk to you next week, brother.
Yeah, sounds good.